Chapter 2. Become a Catalyst for Change. Steve Jobs said that people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are usually the ones who do. What does it mean to be a catalyst for change? The most common definition of the word comes from chemistry, where a catalyst is a substance that causes or speeds up a chemical reaction. But when Rob and I use the word catalyst, we're describing a person who creates positive change in their world through their ideas, actions, and influence. When it comes to making a positive difference in the world, change occurs when someone somewhere takes responsibility for changing himself or herself and then takes action to help others change too. Without the actions of some person, change doesn't happen. A farm boy with a heart to help. We often think of changing the world as something big that takes big plans, large teams, and huge resources. We overestimate the importance of big events and underestimate the value of small actions taken to help others. Some of the greatest catalysts for change in the world took small steps that seemed insignificant at the time, without fanfare, recognition, or reward, and simply allowed one step to lead to the next, ultimately leading to great change. A fantastic example of that is Norman Borlaug. When Rob speaks to people about change, he sometimes asks his audience to name the most important person of the 20th century. I don't know what your answer to that question would be, but Rob's is Borlaug. Born in 1914, Norman grew up working hard on the family farm in Iowa. His grandfather encouraged him to continue his education after high school, so he pursued a degree in forestry at the University of Minnesota. At one point, he had to leave school to work and earn money to complete his degree. His co-workers were poor, and he realized starving. When he saw the positive impact that it had when they were able to get food, he never forgot it. Borlaug said, "I saw how food changed them. All of this left scars on me." It also inspired him to continue his education and eventually earning graduate degrees in plant pathology. After graduating in 1942 in the midst of World War II, he worked for 2 years on chemical compounds for DuPont to help with the country's war effort. But his desire to help starving people never left him. He joined the Rockefeller Foundation's Mexican Hunger Project so that he could help countries like Mexico that were having trouble producing enough crops to feed their people. Borlaug spent countless hours day after day in the fields crossing different strains of wheat to develop plants that could produce more. The work was hard and for decades went unrecognized. In addition to his personal experience with food shortages, Borlaug had additional motivation. In the late 1940s, ecologist William Volk wrote a book entitled Road to Survival, in which he warned that the human race was dangerously close to exhausting its resources. By the late 1960s, when the Earth's population exceeded 3 billion people, some scientists said food shortages due to overpopulation would be inevitable. Paul Ehrlich, a Stanford University biologist, wrote The Population Bomb, whose opening words were, "The battle to feed all of humanity is over," meaning it had already failed. He predicted that hundreds of millions of people would starve to death in the 1970s, including 65 million Americans. He believed India was doomed and that England will not exist in the year 2000. He was convinced humanity was on the brink of an utter breakdown of the capacity of the planet to support humanity. While Ehrlich and others pointed out problems and predicted catastrophe, Borlaug worked. He took the action he could. He used his knowledge of plants and his passion for change and helped to create strains of wheat that could produce more. After years of quiet work, he developed a variety of wheat that tripled or quadrupled wheat production on the same plot of land. By the early 1960s, many farms in Mexico were using Borlaug's innovations, and wheat production had increased sixfold compared to the early 1940s when he arrived in Mexico. Because Borlaug had been a catalyst for change and helped to keep millions of people in Mexico from starving, the governments of India and Pakistan asked him to help them. India's population growth was outpacing its ability to grow enough crops to feed its citizens. Once they started using the seeds Borlaug had developed in Mexico, the crisis in India was also averted. For his work in making a difference, Borlaug had been called the father of the Green Revolution. His scientific work has been credited with saving hundreds of millions of lives by preventing food shortages. There's even a 50% chance you and I have consumed grain descended from one of the varieties that he developed. In 1970, Borlaug was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution to the world food supply. The Nobel Committee said, "More than any other single person of this age, he has helped provide bread for a hungry world." The committee chair quoted Borlaug, saying, "I am patient and do not accept the need for slow change and evolution to improve the agriculture and food production of the emerging countries. There is no time to be lost, considering the magnitude of the world food and population problem. The keys to that change were the small, quiet actions Borlaug took day after day." It's telling that when notification of his winning the prize arrived at Borlaug's home at 4 o'clock in the morning, it missed him. He had already left earlier that morning to work out in the wheat field to continually performing tests on his crops. Change doesn't happen on its own. Norman Borlaug was a person of action. He not only heard enough to seek change, saw enough to desire change, learned enough that he wanted to change, and received enough that he was able to change, but he also was active enough to create change. He became a catalyst, and the work he did not only changed his world, but changed our world. And don't let his advanced degrees, his Nobel Peace Prize, or the size of his impact fool you. The work he did was often unseen and unsung. The small actions he took every day that made him a catalyst occurred in the fields under the hot sun, not in some ivory tower, yet they still changed his world. Underground Railroad conductor Harriet Tubman said, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars to change the world." Well, that is true. To make the dream come true, you must also act. Many things in life just happen, but positive change isn't one of them. Changing anything in our world requires someone to be the catalyst. When it comes to changing our world, the first person transformed is the catalyst, the agent of change. And then it expands. That doesn't happen unless it starts within an individual. Here's how becoming a catalyst developed in me. Change begins with caring. I want to make a difference. When you tell someone he or she can be a catalyst for change, it can sound intimidating. It might appear to be out of reach or too grandiose. C.W. Vandenberg wrote, "To love the whole world for me is no chore. My only real problem is my neighbor next door." But the truth is that caring often begins that simply. The beginnings of transformation are humble and within reach of anyone. It's simply thinking, I want to make a difference. If you care, you have the potential to change your world. Do you want to make a difference somewhere, somehow in your world? If your answer is yes, then you have what it takes to become a catalyst. When President John F. Kennedy launched the Peace Corps, he said that everyone has a change the world speech inside them. I believe that you have a change the world seed inside of you. You just need to nurture it to grow. Change stands up for a cause, doing something that makes a difference. As the seed for change grows within you, it becomes more defined. You begin to understand what it is that you need to do, and you connect with a cause that is from your heart, and you begin to take action. You begin doing things that make a difference. Most of the time, those things are small, and that's okay. Embrace the wisdom that says, do not despise these small beginnings. Small actions may consistently lead to big changes. A friend took a small action that made a big difference in another person's life in April 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Kevin Rathel was in the hospital on life support in Orlando, Florida. Doctors had tried nearly everything they could to save him, but he was unresponsive, and it looked like he was going to die. But then my friend, James Crocker, saw a message on Facebook. Rathel's doctors wanted to try one last thing to save him, giving him plasma from someone who had recovered from COVID-19. They were looking for a donor. James decided that if he were the right blood type, he would take action. He was, and he did. James drove to Orlando from his home in South Florida, and it worked. Within hours, Rathel was conscious and improving. By standing up and taking action, James had saved his life. Change spreads from me to we, with people who want to make a difference. As you work to make a difference and see change begin to occur, you will begin to change. How does this happen? Positive change leads us to a new beginning. Our hopes begin to be realized and our efforts begin to be rewarded. Our hearts begin to be fulfilled and our work will begin to be recognized by others. At this point, you can become a transformation magnet. You can attract others. You can be positively contagious to others who want to make a difference, even if they didn't know how to do it. But now they have you as an example. Seeing you make a difference makes them want to join you. The result? Coming together for a common cause becomes a force multiplier. Your efforts grow from me to we. This is when being a catalyst for change starts to be really exciting. Change steps forward with urgency, at a time when it makes a difference. The phrase "strike while the iron is hot" comes from the blacksmithing trade. Metalworkers understand that timing is crucial if they want to successfully manipulate metal. Steel, for instance, needs to be at the optimum temperature to be able to work. If the metal is cold, it won't move at all when struck with a hammer. If it's not heated enough, even a lot of hammering will make only the smallest of changes. On the other hand, if the metal is too hot, it can melt, rendering it worthless. There is a very short window of a few seconds when the steel's temperature is just right, and the smith must strike quickly, because the metal doesn't stay at that perfect temperature for very long. Similarly, change won't occur unless you step forward and start taking action. If you lose the sense of urgency, your cause can become like cold steel. It won't move, and the change will grind to a halt. So you need to seize whatever opportunities you have now, where you are, and make the most of them. Initiative on fire accomplishes more than knowledge on ice. How you can become a catalyst for change. When I first decided I wanted to make a difference, I had no idea how to do it. I wasn't sure what I would do or where it would take me or how I would even get there. I just knew I wanted to help people. So I started doing what I could. Mother Teresa said, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples." Little did I know that these humble beginnings of just starting to do what I could were creating ripples. You can create ripples too. Here's how to get started. Change from good intentions to good actions. As I write this, my dad Melvin is 98 years old. He's always been my hero, and I've learned a lot from Dad. When I was young, one of his favorite riddles to ask us kids was about 5 frogs sitting on a log. He would say, 4 frogs decided to jump off. How many were left on the log? The first time I answered 1, and Dad replied, no, there are 5. Deciding is not doing. You have to do more than decide, you have to take action. Thanks to those frogs on a log, I learned there's a huge difference between good intentions and good actions. Let me explain. People with good intentions want to add value to others, but find reasons not to do it. People with good actions want to add value to others and find ways to do it. People with good intentions can be passive, inconsistent, and disappointing. People with good actions are deliberate, consistent, and willful. Good actions represent the dividing line between words and results. We often hear about the haves and the have-nots. When it comes to making a difference in changing our world, we should probably be talking about the do's and the do-nots. We tend to want others to judge us by our intentions, but what ultimately matters isn't what we intend to do. It's what we actually do. How do we miss this? We rarely tell ourselves, I'm never going to do this good thing. Instead, we tell ourselves, I'm going to do this tomorrow. But when tomorrow comes, we don't follow through. Maybe we mean to, but we don't. That's why the biggest gap between failure and success is the distance between I should and I did. Management expert Peter Drucker said, you cannot predict the future, but you can create it. As catalyst for change, that's what you do. You create a future that is better by following through today. Don't settle for good intentions. They won't change the world. Focus on good actions. Become a possibilist. Recently, Rob shared with me a great book by a professor and physician, Hans Rosling, that has shaped the way that he thinks about creating change. And I learned a new word along with this fantastic concept. Let me share it with you. Here's what Hans said. People often call me an optimist because I show them the enormous progress they didn't know about. That makes me angry because I'm not an optimist. That makes me sound naive. I'm a very serious possibilist. That's something that I made up. It means someone who neither hopes without reason nor fears without reason. Someone who constantly resists the overdramatic worldview. As a possibilist, I see all this progress, and it fills me with a conviction and hope that further progress is possible. This is not optimistic. It is having a clear and reasonable idea about how things are. It is having a worldview that is constructive and useful. When people wrongly believe that nothing is improving, they may conclude that nothing we have tried so far is working, and then they lose confidence in measures that actually work. I meet many such people who tell me that they've lost all hope for humanity, or they may become radical, supporting drastic measures that are counterproductive when, in fact, the methods we are already using to improve our world are working just fine. A solution that works for me is to persuade myself to keep 2 thoughts in my head at the same time. It seems that when we hear someone say things are getting better, we think that they are also saying, don't worry, relax, or look away. But when I say things are getting better, I'm not saying those things at all. I am certainly not advocating looking away from terrible problems of the world. I am saying that things can be both bad and better. What a great word, possibilist. Rosling's perspective is right. We need to both do something to change the world and see positive things happening in the world. When you think like a possibilist, You are actively on the lookout for the possibilities in the world. Sadly, most people could use possibility therapy. They're like the people Rosling described who neither see nothing but doom and gloom in the world and lose hope, or they're blind and indifferent to the problems that are around them. Are you a possibilist? If your answer to any of these questions is yes, then you are. Do you think progress is possible but not easy? Do you see things as they are but not get discouraged? Are you unwilling to look away from problems that move you? Are you willing to do what you can to make your world a better place? If you answered yes to those questions, you're a possibilist. My friend Marcus Buckingham says that leaders are rarely pessimists. To lead change, to be a catalyst, you have to believe that you can make a difference. And that's good news because you can. Just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean you can't be the one to do it. Why shouldn't you be? Many of the catalysts of the world are unknown, unsung heroes who are possibilists. Rob met one named Tiffany, a 12-year-old girl, when he was visiting an extremely impoverished school in Lima, Peru. While waiting to go into the classroom, he was looking at a student's artwork hanging on the wall, and one picture really jumped out at him because it was so full of life and hope. The artist was Tiffany, who was full of confidence and optimism. When she invited Rob and his team, which included a camera crew, to visit her home, he readily accepted. Wanting to better understand her community, they followed her into a squatter's district in a part of San Juan. The farther we walked, the poorer it got, Rob said. As we arrived at her living space, a shack, the roof was literally being repossessed by a group of workers for lack of payment. Her father, an out-of-work artist, was passed out drunk. Her mother was gone, working one of the 2 jobs she tried to have to keep the family fed. And he said, I saw the life and optimism drain out of Tiffany's face, replaced with shame and embarrassment. He said, I was so broken for her. Rob immediately asked the film crew to turn off the cameras. They paid for the roof to keep them from losing that, and he did his best to encourage her. In situations like these, Rob's heart makes him want to adopt a child like Tiffany, but he knows that the best thing he can do is to connect her with people and programs that give her opportunities to develop as a person. So that's what he did. With that little bit of help and encouragement, Tiffany became the first person in her family to graduate from high school and go to college. It changed her world, and she could have gone anywhere and done anything. But Tiffany chose to stay in her hometown and be a catalyst for change. She started a school for children for struggling families called Little Stars of Love. She is creating positive change in her community by allowing boys and girls that grew up in the slum where she was born to learn and grow so that they too can change their world. And her example so impacted her family that her father no longer drinks alcohol, and he supports his daughter by bringing lunch to the school children every day. Take ownership. In my book, Put Your Dream to the Test, one of the first questions I recommend people to ask themselves is this: is my dream really my dream? Why? Because if the dream you intend to pursue isn't really yours, you won't own it. And if you won't own it, you won't do what it takes to achieve it. Your dream becomes your dream when you recognize the contribution that you can make. The same is true for becoming a catalyst for change. Only if you own it will you be able to fulfill it. I was reminded of this in 2011 when I met with the board of my nonprofit organization, Equip. We had just celebrated the fantastic milestone of training 5 million leaders from every country in the world. When you finally achieve a major goal that you've been pursuing for well over a decade, the question is, what's next? The board and I were discussing what we should do next. Should we target training another 1 million leaders to get to the 6 million mark? Should we celebrate our victory? How about Should we shut down the organization and just call it a day? That's what many of the board members wanted to do. But I had a strong sense that we were not done as an organization. Something had been stirring in me for several years, namely to shift from training leaders to transforming leaders. The board members wanted to know more, but at the time I couldn't articulate it. I didn't know how we would do it. I didn't even know how to define transformation at the time. But I believed that we should take action despite not having all the answers. Some of my board members were with me 100%. If I sensed it, they were willing to support it. Most were willing to support me while giving some time for me to figure it out, but not everyone was. A couple of board members simply didn't see it and stepped off the board. That didn't lessen my love for them, but I made a decision. Even if I had to go it alone, I would commit to transformation. That's the day I became the owner of the vision. When I made the commitment, it was a tangible step toward becoming a catalyst. I've learned that whenever I feel a sense of conviction about an issue, I just need to start moving in the direction I believe that I should go, even when I'm uncertain. Someone who is a fantastic example of a change catalyst who takes ownership of his vision for change is actor, writer, director, and producer Tyler Perry. A couple of years ago, he agreed to speak at a Live to Lead event hosted by the John Maxwell Company. Most people who have followed his career know that he grew up poor and abused in New Orleans, and he began writing as a kind of therapy after watching an episode on the Oprah Winfrey Show in which she talked about the benefits of writing. Perry started his career by writing and performing in a play titled, I Know I've Been Changed. The first time he staged it, no one came to watch. But when he got a second chance, it became highly successful. Then Hollywood and the rest of the nation began to recognize him as he created the character Medea and played her in the movies. Perry is also the founder and owner of Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, and has been recognized as the first African American to own a major film studio. He once said, "I've never been one to knock on the door and say, 'Please let me in.' I've always tried to make my own way. I do not think change comes from asking people to let you in. I think change comes by becoming the owners of studios, owners of projects, owners of content." Before Perry went on stage for his talk, we had a chance to talk about leadership, and he told me part of his story. In 2006, he bought property and built his first studio in Atlanta after the success of the early Medea films. He quickly outgrew the space, so he sold that property, purchased a larger location, and built a second studio. He outgrew that one too. So he bought a bigger site where he could build a studio that he thought he would never outgrow, and much to his surprise, that one soon went beyond capacity. Perry told me that after he outgrew that studio, he thought, "I don't want to do this anymore." The last thing he wanted to do was to have to build again. He just wanted to keep making movies and television shows. But then he thought about all the people who already worked for him and all the additional people he could employ. So he went looking for an even bigger space. In 2015, he bought part of Fort McPherson, a historic site in Atlanta, and he spent 4 years building it out, making it one of the largest production facilities in the country with 12 sound stages, 200 acres of green space, backlot, and offices. When you can afford to quit, you can't afford to quit, Perry told me, explaining that when you've made it, you no longer need to do more, but that's when you can do more than you've ever done before. That's when you can make the greatest difference. His ownership of the vision to change the world has made it possible for him to impact tens of thousands of lives, and his continual commitment means that he will not only impact greater numbers in the future, that he will live a legacy that lives beyond him. His sense of purpose, his why, is bigger than he is, and it will outlive him. He is living testament of a statement that was made by the education activist Malala Yousafzai. Let us remember, one book, one pen, one child, and one teacher can change the world. Tyler Perry started as a kid with a pen and a dream, and look at him now. Use your past changes as inspiration for future change. Whatever changes you have fought for and won in the past should inspire you to believe that you can change again in the future. And those changes, even incremental internal changes, will help you to make changes in your world. The Greek philosopher Plutarch said what we achieve inwardly will change outer reality. I'm a great believer in the idea that I did it, so you can too. Why? Because I've seen myself change from a people pleaser to a leader. I've gone from being someone with the destination disease to a lifelong learner who never expects to arrive, growth-oriented instead of goal-oriented. I've grown from being fundamentally selfish to someone who wants to add value to others. I've changed, and that qualifies me to help other people change, and it also inspires passion within me to help them make those changes. We need to be changed to bring change to others. Dreams aren't measured by the size of the project, but by the level of faith and the degree of change within the person that leads it. Invite others to join the cause. When you become a catalyst for change, one of the most significant things you can do is invite others to join you in the cause. As soon as another person works with you and is influenced by what you're doing, you're a leader whose why is bigger than you. Martin Luther King Jr. said about the importance of leader when it comes to change, "May I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, and dedicated leadership, leaders of sound integrity, leaders not in love with publicity but in love with justice, leaders not in love with money but in love with humanity, leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause." Please don't be intimidated or discouraged by King's description of the leaders needed for an important cause. You don't have to be someone of his caliber to make a difference. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. You can and should influence others to work alongside of you. Change requires a diversity of talents and skills in order to be accomplished. Your job is to give everyone who joins you permission to operate in their gifting and invite them to be in the story. If you aren't a good public speaker, find someone who is. If you tend to be a skeptic, balance yourself by inviting someone who is optimistic. Why? None of us is as smart as all of us. We recommend that you start by gathering friends and family. You already have influence with them, and you certainly already are like-minded, at least in some areas. If you're not sure how much influence you have, answer these questions by writing down the names of as many people as you can think for each. Who listens when you talk? Who asks for your advice? Who respects your experience? Who follows your recommendation? Who seeks your opinions? Who enjoys working beside you? Who advocates for you? Who values your time? Who shares positive things about you with others? Who do you add value to? Those names that you wrote down, these are the first people you should talk to about your cause. They are most likely to join you because, as the friendship principle says in my book, Winning with People, all things being equal, people will work with people they like. All things not being equal, they still will. Here's how you can go about gathering them. Share your passion. The most important thing you can do is speak from your heart about the change you want to make and what you want to do to try to create it. Let people know how important it is to you and why. Passion is contagious with like-minded people. Use it to paint the vision. Ask what they think. Once you've shared your passion, don't try to sell them on your cause. Instead, ask them what they think and really listen. Pay attention not only to their words, but also to their body language. Ask follow-up questions. Try to gauge whether they connect with your idea, are unmoved by it, or somewhere in between. Invite them to improve your ideas. You know you don't have to have all the answers, and so will they. Invite them to give you their ideas. They may be able to improve your ideas or offer even better ones. Asking for input also increases buy-in. If people are on the fence, the process of contributing ideas just might draw them in and increase their connection to you and the cause. When people contribute ideas, your dream becomes their dream. Ask whether it's something you can do together. As you finish a conversation about your cause, don't leave things ambiguous. Be bold. Ask if they would be willing to join you in making a difference. The people who change the world influence others to think, speak, and act in such a way that it makes a positive difference in their lives and in the lives of others. Don't leave that to chance. But if you have to convince them to see the vision, you will have to convince them to take action. You want a partner, not a prisoner. So gladly welcome the willing onto your team and allow the uncommitted to go their way. Focus on what you can do. Billionaire philanthropist Bill Austin said, "We can't change everything, but we can change something." The questions to ask are, what can I change? What can I do exceptionally well? What's my A game? What do I do that consistently makes a positive impact? That's what you should be focusing on. As you heard these questions, what comes to mind? Do you know with certainty where your focus should be? If not, maybe you need some perspective. Organizational psychologist Benjamin Hardy said, "True learning occurs when you can see the same thing with new eyes." They call this the Copernican revolution. For example, when we as people realized the sun did not revolve around the earth but vice versa, that single insight shifted how we saw everything. We were looking at the same stimulus, but with a new frame. How can you develop a new frame? You need to try to look at yourself objectively. Your best contribution will be based on your gifts, your past successes, your passions, your opportunities. Take some time to write down what they are. If you have difficulty identifying them, ask others who know you well to share their observations. Then try to figure out how they add up. Why is this important? Well, there are several reasons. First, what you focus on expands. Second, what you focus on shapes how you view yourself. It impacts your future. Third, you will never be what you ought to be until you're doing what you ought to be doing. Do something. Rob's dad, Bob, founded One Hope in 1987, and he always understood the importance of taking action. Rob has often heard his dad say, "Just do something." When someone would present a pressing need to Bob, his response was always, "So, what are you going to do about it?" His dad's example of seeing a need and taking action has influenced how Rob leads One Hope and how many other initiatives and movements he is a part of. In the words of Dwayne Mellor, a leader who helped implement the positive changes at Avondale, "The smallest deed is greater than the largest intention." Now is the time to do something. It's okay to start even when you don't have all the answers. Do what you know to do. You don't need to know every step of the way. There is no silver bullet. There is no perfect plan. Focus on purpose, not perfection. There is no standing still when it comes to making a difference. You're either moving forward or you're sliding backwards. Start moving forward. And invite others to join you. If you don't, you may look back a year from now and wish that you had started today. When I started Equip, I had no idea that we would train millions of leaders. When Rob took over One Hope, he didn't know the organization would be able to help children in nearly every country in the world. We just took steps forward, hoping to make a difference. Your goal is to make things better however you can. Think about what better can do. Incremental change is better than status quo. Author and Service Master Chairman Emeritus William Pollard said, "Without change, there is no innovation, creativity, or incentive for improvement. Those who initiate change will have a better opportunity to manage the change that is inevitable." Would you rather have a hand in positive change or just be swept along in the negative change that's going to happen without you? We would rather be catalysts for positive change without preconditions. We believe you would too. A heart for Bangladesh. When you are willing to take small steps and become a catalyst, there's really no telling what it can lead to or how great an impact you might make. If you ask my friend Maria, when she was a young girl, what kind of impact she would make to others, I doubt that she could have ever dreamed of doing a fraction of what she has actually done. I met Maria in Dubai at a conference where both of us were slated to speak. She told me some of her story, and it blew me away. We started to develop a friendship, and when I got home, I did some research to find out more about her. Maria was born in a small village in Portugal. When she was 2 years old, her mother was ill, and she went to Lisbon to find work, and Maria was left to stay with an Angolan immigrant named Maria Mastos, who worked as a cleaning woman. Sadly, Maria's mother never returned from Lisbon. Despite having 6 children of her own to feed and care for, Matos raised Maria as her own, even going against authorities who wanted to take the child away and put her in foster care. When Maria was 9, Matos died. By the time Maria was 12, she had quit school and gone to work cleaning houses to support herself. She threw herself into her work. I thought, if I have to be a cleaner, then I will be the best cleaner around. She worked hard, but she also had dreams of traveling the world. At 18, she left her home country to search for a better life. She worked hard, learned English and French, and started getting better employment in restaurants. Eventually, while in England, she applied for a position as flight attendant with Emirates Airlines, based out of Dubai, and she got the job. Her work took her to, among other places, Bangladesh. What she saw there struck her, both bringing her pain and inspiring her. In 2005, I was in Dhaka, and I visited the slums, she said. They were living in makeshift homes and were surrounded by much garbage and filth. The scarcity of resources and livelihood in slums was drastic, so I started to help, just in a small way to start. Maria was especially struck by the plight of girls there. Typically, they were treated like property and married off by their families by the age 13. By 18, they usually had 4 or 5 children, and they were trapped in poverty for life. Rather than walking away, Maria decided to do something. I began by taking all my holidays in Bangladesh, and I promised 101 families with 600 students between them that I would do everything I could to take their children out of poverty, slavery, and destitution. Many people in Dubai helped me with building up the community and several facilities, including a school. Maria worked with the corporate sponsors and influential people in Dubai to help the poor in Bangladesh. But when the 2009 recession hit, donations and funding disappeared overnight. She didn't let that stop her. Now that she had become a catalyst for change, she was not going to let anything stop her from making a difference. Looking for another way to raise money, she turned to the internet. She discovered that her best way forward would be to do something to get noticed, to use charity campaigns to raise funds. With no experience and no special athletic talent, she trained to climb a mountain, and in 2010 she summited Mount Kilimanjaro. But that didn't get the attention she had hoped for, so she set her sights on another target. In 2011, she trekked to the North Pole. She was the first Portuguese woman in the world to do it. That year, she also walked a marathon in each of the 7 emirates of the United Arab Emirates in 7 days. She was able to gain enough attention that a prominent school in Dubai provided scholarships for 5 children from the slums of Dhaka for an education up to the age of 18. She also was frustrated that the impact of her efforts were so short-lived. So she decided she needed to do something really big. She would climb Mount Everest. After training for a year, she made the attempt and reached the summit in 2013. "It was not for the glory that I set out this expedition," said Maria. "It was a desperate measure to help slum children in Dhaka. I wanted them to live with dignity and give them opportunities that I had when I was young." Though she missed her goal of raising $1 million for her climb, she started to gain attention for her causes. With that success behind her, she ramped up her efforts, taking on one amazing feat after another. Her main gift was not athletic talent, but sheer determination. She holds multiple Guinness World Records, including most consecutive days running an official ultramarathon by a female and the fastest time to run an ultramarathon on each continent by a female. After that, she started doing Ironman competitions. She even attempted to swim the English Channel only a year after learning how to swim. She described herself as a little village girl from a poor background doing this crazy challenge. But her efforts have paid off. After 15 years, the older students she helped are now in universities around the world. Inspired by Maria's story, I invited her to speak to 3,000 of my coaches in Orlando. She was so passionate that everyone in the room was inspired to support her cause. In a matter of minutes, they donated $150,000. But her road hasn't been easy. She said it always has been a challenge to be taken seriously in countries or societies where women are not supposed to be strong or taken seriously as leaders, and specifically in Bangladesh. She said, "You really have to prove yourself, prove that you're right. You have to be a woman of action, and I think it's the same for the rest of the world. Action is what gets things done." That's spoken like a true catalyst. Maria has experienced the change cycle and has become a catalyst. So did Norman Bullock and Tyler Perry and Tiffany from Peru. Each of them has a different skill set, a different background, but they are all making a difference, and so can you. The change cycle goes like this. I experience something so life-changing that I change. I share something so life-changing so that you can change. We facilitate together so that life-changing becomes a part of other people's change. The process begins with you. The scale of what you do, it doesn't matter. If you're willing to embrace change yourself, take action, the transformation process has already begun. You've already started to become a catalyst for change, and you can change your world. As I finish reading you this chapter, I'm going back inside and I'm reflecting on just what we learned together. And I think there are a couple things I just want to highlight. One is the fact that good intentions and good actions are a world apart. In fact, I would say to you that good intentions are maybe the most two overrated words in the English language. No one has ever brought personal change by just good intentions without action. Nobody has ever added great value to other people because they wanted to or intended to, but never did. You see, it's the dividing line between words and results. One of my favorite parts of this chapter that I just read to you is the part about a possibilist. But by the way, again, that's a word that has just been made. I spell that word Possibilist, possibilist. And I guess I want you to know that word because I think it's just the way to live. It's higher than optimism. Remember, optimism was passive, but possibilists, they are the ones who took action. It's kind of like they were idealistic enough to believe, but they are realistic enough to go out and work. I can remember several years ago now, Truett Cathy, who was the founder of Chick-fil-A, we were having a lunch together. I always loved spending time with this great man, this great founder. And he had at lunch, he had a cup, and the cup read on the side of it, "If it's to be, it's up to me." And I said, "Hey, Truett, I like that cup." In fact, I'll never forget. He smiled and he handed it to me and said, "Well, if you like it, it's yours." But as I looked at those words on that cup, "If it's to be, it's up to me." And Truett said to me, those words are all 2 letters, but they'll change your life and they'll change the life of people around you. So as we kind of finish chapter 2, being a catalyst for change, I kind of want you to, adopt that as a motto in your life. If it's to be, it's up to me. Those 2-letter words, when backed with your passion and with your action, will be the starting point, the initiative, the catalyst to get you moving in the right direction. And remember this again, when you start, you don't have all the answers. Don't worry about that. The answers come as you move. The people who never get the answers are the people who don't move. So be a catalyst right now. Before you even finish with me with a book, what can you do today that adds value to someone that can make a difference in your life? Don't wait for the book to be finished before you start the great work of transformation.